Hello and welcome to the Wheel of Crime podcast, the podcast where two ladies play games, mumble profanities, and laugh way too often. Also, this podcast does cover topics of sensitive nature, and as such, listener discretion is advised.
Hello, and welcome back to the Wheel of Crime podcast. Oh my god, my name is Jenn.
My name is Emily, and we're just the most ridiculous pair of people ever because we talk ourselves into this. We're like, oh my gosh, we're finally able to record again. Like, everything's fine. Look at us go. I prepped, like, that 6 stories and everything to, like, get us through till Christmas just to end up with the worst illness since COVID, actually. I think maybe I had COVID again. I don't know what it is. I was so sick, guys, for like 2.5 weeks. I'm still sick. I can't hear out of one of my ears. And then I kept like talking to Jen, and I was like, okay, Jen, like, can we try and put out a solo episode? What can we do? And then her work just went bananas, and I was like, you know what? This is fine. This is fine.
It's fine. Everything's fine.
So if I sound all like Donald Duckish during this recording, I'm just doing my best. It's been a journey to get to this point.
I know. Our New Year's resolution will be to be better next year.
But see,
maybe.
I would say that, but then this is just going to be exactly like what I just said, where it's like, yeah, we're going to do this. And then the universe is like, bitch, you ain't. So I'm just going to say, I hope next year's just at least a little more manageable as far as my responsibilities and time requirements go.
It's true. I don't know, man. I'm on vacay mode currently, so I'm just vibing here. Like, Emily's working and stressed and behind on her Christmas shopping, and I'm just like, I'm done Christmas shopping, basically. Like 2 people left to buy for. I'm chilling. I had eye mask and curlers on when she called me earlier.
It's
like,
true.
I'm good.
She had like a pink little hair curler in her bags, and I was like, oh my goodness, like, who is this woman? I've never seen her so relaxed.
I needed it so badly for my soul. Like, I finished mid-November on my show, and I think I took the first week after we were done and barely moved. Like, I rotted. I needed a whole week of rotting and sleeping, basically. So that's what I did. And I feel a lot better.
That's good, though. I feel like people say bed rotting and you're like, ew. Like, it comes with like a weird negative connotation. I, every single day, picture the day where I can just lay in bed for not just one day, but multiple days in a row and just have nothing going on. I'm so desperate for it, because that's like a thing where with me just being sick and everything, people are like, oh, it must have been so nice to just lay there and relax. No, I still had people need things for me for work. It's different when you're sick. I need to be healthy and rot.
Exactly. That is the elite combo. And honestly, I had plans that first week and canceled them because I was like, what am I doing? I can't see anyone this week. This is my week to rot. Fuck all y'all.
What am I doing? No, I love that for you. Yes, Jen is totally right. I'm in the trenches right now. I've been having stress dreams for the last couple weeks about
it's rough, buddy.
Work and Christmas shopping and all these things that I just don't have time for. And hopefully that changes. It hasn't yet.
Oh, man.
I just live in distress with, I'm half deaf also, dear listeners, in one of my ears. So I've had to relearn how to talk to people, I've noticed, because I was too quiet, because my voice is louder inside of my own head. And that's been fun. And yeah, so
I don't even know what to say about that. R.I.P. you. I'm praying for you, Emily.
Yeah, and like I said, I'm pretty sure I had COVID again. Like, at first I was like, man, this is the worst flu I've had in ages. And then I like thought about it for 2 seconds, and I was like, it's probably
it's
COVID.
It's got that COVID stank.
Yeah, especially because I've been sick now for like 2 weeks, 2.5 weeks, and it still hasn't gone. I'm like, yeah, it's got that COVID stank on it.
Gross. I think I'm gonna knock on wood that I avoid that shit, because
I just have fake wood. Hang on. Do I have real wood around here? I do. that I get better soon because I need it.
Mm-hmm.
So then,
You do.
what's been so after your week of rotting, what has been your like go-to fun thing, or like your hobby, or like what have you been doing to like occupy your time when you're not doing the crazy work stuff?
I've been working. I feel like because I've just come out of my week of rot, right? So like this is my first non-rot week, and we're about midway through her. I feel like I've just been catching up on things that I had to put off forever because I had no time. So just like random house things and like life things. I finally went to the fucking doctors. Me to go to the doctors. I tried making a doctor's appointment in July. And I went back and forth with the fucking medical assistant because she's like, what about this time? I'm like, sorry, I can't. I'm working. And like, I could not find a fucking time. So I finally got to see my damn doctor.
It's always the positives. I really think, though, that a lot of these places like doctor's offices and dentist's office and stuff, the whole like 9 to 5, Monday to Friday thing is never gonna fucking work for full-time employed people. Like, what do you mean you want to see me at 1 p.m. on a Tuesday? What do you think I'm doing at 1 p.m. on a Tuesday?
I'm at my job. Why can't you be available when I'm not working?
Yeah, it's very weird to me. But I am glad that you got to see your doctor. I'm currently also having that same fight because I need to, I think it's like renew a couple of prescriptions or something. And then my doctor wanted to do a follow-up with me for my cold sores and stuff like that, because I did like an experimental treatment for them like a year and a half ago, and it's worked, but they've recently come back. So then I was supposed to go in when that happened so that they could like see what's going on. That was like 4 months ago. Still haven't seen them. We'll see what happens.
Yeah, I think I'm gonna get an IUD for the girlies out there.
Ooh.
I booked an appointment for that.
Now,
so,
did you do it at an actual gynecological clinic?
So no, technically the gynecologist I'm seeing has like her actual gynecologist office in like a different part of town that's like kind of far from me, but she does like weekly visits to the doctor's office that's closest to me.
See, as long as
she
it's
like
somebody
comes.
who does that kind of stuff. Most of the horror stories I've learned all come from people who went and got them done, myself included, from non-gynecologists. So, just saying.
Yeah, I did have your story in the back of my head when I was contemplating this, but I think I'm gonna take the risk anyway. Why not? Fuck it.
Well, I think here's the thing. Not to say that men shouldn't work on women when they're doctors. But to say it.
But I will say it.
Yeah. There's just, I think, a different level of understanding and empathy when it comes to female practitioners, when it comes to reproductive health, especially if that's their field of practice. So I already think that you're going to have a much better experience than I had.
I honestly could never go to a man gynecologist. Like, I have a hard enough time going to male doctors. Only when forced.
Yeah.
But, yeah, I'm like, something about you gives me the ick.
See, here's what happened with me, though. I have a female doctor who I had been seeing who was supposed to be the one who did the appointment, who went on maternity leave, and I did not know that her husband with the same last name worked at the same place.
Is this that clinic?
Yes.
Near...
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Let me know how it goes. I feel like it'll be a journey, but I'm on a happy journey, I think, at least, because one of my sisters also recently went to go get an IUD, and they have had nothing but good things to say about it.
That's good. I'm glad to hear something positive because I'm really nervous.
Yeah, they just went to a female gynecologist, local anesthesia too, so no pain or anything, and just chilling. No hormones. They got the copper IUD or whatever it is, and no complaints.
Perfect. I can't wait.
But there was something you said that reminded me of something else, because I think we were talking about what we've been up to in like our time when we're not like just being sad and busy
and missing each other.
We've been missing each other a lot for our listeners here, it's been like a few months since Jen and I have seen each other in person. We live like a couple hours away from each other. Not that far, but just far enough where it's kind of hard to manage when you have
where it's like inconvenient enough when you don't have like extra time.
That's exactly it. For me, I've been sleeping a lot, which I definitely think is a symptom of being burnt out, because I basically sleep until I have to work and then get off work and I'm like, ooh, I'm too tired to eat, and then I have a snack and go to bed. But when I'm not doing that, I've been playing video games, because even though I want to read, here's my issue. I want to read. I have a list of books I want to read. But because I read for my job, when I clock out at the end of the day, sitting there and reading, it's like the words don't even register in my brain. Like, I need to vegetate. So I've been playing a lot of video games instead of reading, which sucks because I don't think I'm going to meet my reading goal this year. Which is fine, I guess. I think I gave up on that goal like 3 months ago, so.
What was your goal?
Well, I read 30 last year, and my goal was 30 again this year. And I'm not even at 25 yet. I think I've read 21 books this year.
Dude, I think last year my goal was 30. And I read like 18. So this year I made my goal 12. And I think I read like 5.
See, I have a friend of mine who I'm like... So my friends that read have now all... gathered into a group that's like not a book club but a place to talk about books, and one of these people was like, I should have done better on my reading goal this year, like I didn't really think about it, whatever. And I was like, oh my god, bitch, me too. No, they meant that they set their reading goal to be 100 and they've read 300 books this year. And I was like, huh? Consider my flowers gasted, because I was like, What do you mean? What do you mean? And they have similar hobbies to me, where they also like to play video games and they like to do these other things, play Dungeons and Dragons. And I'm like, where do you find the time?
Oh my god. They must be reading some short books. Can I count pictures?
Yeah, I was like, they have to be 20 pages long. There's no way. There's not a chance.
There's literally no way.
That was like... I was talking to somebody else literally about the same thing about like reading and stuff, and they were like, oh my god, it took me so long to read this one book or whatever. And I was like, oh man, like I thought it'd be a little bit longer, like the book that you and I picked, the Court of the Vampire Queen, because that's a long book. I did not realize how long it was. It's a long book. I was like, oh man, I'm having the same struggle with this book. It's just way longer than I thought it was gonna be. No, their book was like 200 pages, and I was like, god damn, I wish my book was 200 pages.
Right? Like, I'm sorry. If you're struggling with 200 pages, I'm struggling with 200 pages, for the record. But if you are, like...
especially if it's been a few months. At that point, I'm like, I think you just don't like it. I think...
You gotta give up.
I think you just gotta retire it. I don't think it's for you at that point.
Away. No.
Look away. It's fine. Pick up something else.
I feel like that's my problem this year, is that I've been reading a lot of long books, like really long books, and it's been taking me a while to get through them individually. So I'm just like, because I have like 5, I have other things that I'm doing too, and I don't have time to read 300 books. I just don't. But like,
you know what I'm gonna do actually? I'm going to talk to one of my friends in this, one of my other friends, not the 300 book person, because that's crazy. But, like, I have a different friend in the not book club that I'm in who reads specifically short, unhinged books. Like, that is their specific interest. I'm just going to get them to send me a list and send them to you. There's, like, one where a girl falls in love with a door. Like, stuff that, like, where you look at it and you're like, bitch, what the fuck is that? But it's interesting enough. And she actually has some really good recs for, even though they're unhinged, she's found some good ones. And I'm like, you know what? I gotta get a list of that, because I think that's what I need. Something that's just short and a little bit crazy.
Yeah. I think I just need to, like, get back into the swing of things, because work was too crazy. So I was like, I just don't have time. I don't have the mental energy to hold space for the lyrics of Defying Gravity, let alone read a book.
The lyrics of Defying Gravity. That's hilarious. And also, so relatable because I've had this song Defying Gravity. I have not seen the movie yet, by the way, Wicked 2 or whatever. I've never even watched the musical. I've been like, that specific song has been stuck in my head for like the last 3 days straight, and I'm a maniac. I don't know.
Have you, I'm sure you have, you've seen that interview clip, right?
I've heard of it. I have not actually seen it myself yet.
Oh, it's so good. I'm going to send it to you later.
Okay, sounds good. But for our listeners here today, so since we're already kind of being non-tradish with our recording these last 3-ish months, because apparently that's just what happens sometimes, I'm going to do the part 2 of the story that I started with in October, because even though technically you haven't heard from Jen yet with her story since then, it would be a little unfair to make you guys wait longer for a part 2, because I think after this we're going to be getting into our Christmas holiday special episodes, and 3 months is a long time to wait for a part 2, and we're not going to do that to you guys.
Yeah, it's now or January. So
or never.
It's now.
No, not never. It would happen someday, but it would be a long time. So
and yeah. So we're going to go with now.
Yeah, we're going to go with now. And for a reminder, this is the part 2 of the Mercy Brown vampire incident, where last episode I talked about the actual Mercy Brown family, kind of like the history of vampires at the time, a very sexy archaeologist, which I have, you know what, for how much our, because I based my notes off of an article that was written by a lady who did an interview with him, for how much they talked about him and his overall silver-haired studliness, have not looked up to see what he looks like. So maybe I'll do that at the end of today's episode and see if he actually is a super, super hunk of a man. I have my doubts, but I could always be surprised.
Some things are just better left to the imagination.
But that's kind of my thought. I was like, maybe it would ruin things, because from what I know right now, he's just like a splendid-looking fella whose research is vampires, and maybe that's all we need.
You know what? I choose to believe he's hot, and I don't need no picture to prove it.
I'm with you on that one. So, basically, we are going to be talking a little bit about how the Mercy Brown incident kind of started this chain of other events that happened during this vampire epidemic that happened. So, that means, sorry guys, no wheel questions today, because this is a continuation of an episode, and I'm not going to do a description for you because it's a continuation of an episode.
We did that last time, so if you're really missing it, go back and listen.
This is true, and you can only ask so many questions and describe so much about one single story, and I don't have it in me.
Don't worry, the Christmas descriptions are coming, and we all know that you need to know what a Yule log is for the 9th time.
It's true, because you might have forgotten in the last 12 months, and that's what we're here for.
Who's to say?
Who's to say?
Yeah.
So, with that, let's get into it. Even at the time, New England's vampire panic struck onlookers as a baffling anachronism. The late 1800s were a period of social progress and scientific flowering. Indeed, many of the Rhode Island exhumations occurred within 20 miles of Newport, high society's summer nucleus, where the scions of the Industrial Revolution vacationed. At first, only people who'd lived in or had visited the vampire-ridden communities knew of the scandal. We seem to have been transported back to the darkest age of unreasoning ignorance and blind superstition, instead of living in the 19th century and in a state calling itself enlightened and Christian. One writer at a small-town Connecticut paper opinionated in the wake of the 1854 exhumation. But Lena Brown's exhumation made news. First, a reporter from the Providence Journal witnessed her unearthing. Then a well-known anthropologist named George Stetson traveled to Rhode Island to probe the barbaric superstition in the surrounding area. Published in the venerable American Anthropologist Journal, Stetson's account of New England's vampires made waves throughout the world. Before long, even members of the foreign press were offering various explanations for the phenomenon. Perhaps the neurotic modern novel was driving the New England madness, or maybe shrewd local farmers had simply been pulling Stetson's leg. A writer from the London Post declared, that whatever forces drove the Yankee vampire, it was an American problem and most certainly not the product of a British folk tradition, even though many families in the area could trace their lineage directly back to England. But who's to say?
Classic Brits. Yeah. Shucking responsibility.
They're like, yeah, these families all came from Britain, but like, we have nothing to do with vampire stories.
But what of it?
Yeah, but what of it? I love, too, just going back to an earlier episode we did on vampires, literally the first ever vampire with the creepy long fingernails that scratched at everybody's windows was a European vampire. Like, I get not Britain specifically, but, like, that's pretty fucking close to home.
Yeah, like, it does not take that much time to travel between countries in Europe. We all know that, so.
You drive 2 hours and you're suddenly in France. From anywhere.
Literally, you can walk across the border in some places, so...
Yeah, very different. In the Boston Daily Globe, a writer went so far as to suggest that perhaps the frequent intermarriage of families in these backcountry districts may partially account for some of their characteristics. Basically, people were like, maybe you guys are having vampire problems because you guys are having incest relations with your families. And I was like, that's crazy.
I mean, once a cousin fucker.
Always a cousin fucker,
Oh, is it always a cousin sucker? I don't know.
Who's to say? So... Yuck. In one 1896 New York World clipping even found its way into the papers of a London stage manager and aspiring novelist named Bram Stoker, whose theater company was touring the United States that same year. His Gothic masterpiece Dracula was published in 1897, and some scholars have said that there wasn't enough time for the news accounts to have influence over the Dracula manuscript. Yet others see Lena in the character of Lucy, her very name a tempting amalgamation of Lena and Mercy, and a consumptive seeming teenage girl turned vampire who is exhumed in one of the novel's most memorable scenes. Fascinatingly, a medical doctor presides over Lucy's discernment, just as one oversaw Lena's. Whether or not Lucy's roots are in Rhode Island, Lena's historic exhumation is referenced in H.P. Lovecraft's The Shunned House, a short story about a man being haunted by dead relatives that include a living character named Mercy. And through fiction and fact, Lena's narrative continues today. Part of Belle's research involves going on legend trips, the modern graveside pilgrimage made by those who believe or want to believe that the undead stalk Rhode Island. On legend trips, Belle is largely an academic presence. He can even be a bit of a killjoy, declaring that the main reason that no grass grows on a vampire's grave is that vampire graves have so many visitors who crush all the vegetation. Which, like, killjoy, yes. But is he also probably right?
Yeah, I feel like that kind of checks out.
That I'll give him that one. That makes sense to me. It's like, oh, a famous vampire grave has no grass on it. And it's like, yeah, probably because there's 50 million people who step on that grave every single day.
Who were like, I want to see Dracula.
Show me Dracula. I heard he's hot.
And I heard hot professors write about him, so maybe I'll run into one of them.
All I know is somebody's hot in this equation, and I want to see a vampire. Like,
I'm ready.
Yeah, I'm ready. Yeah, literally, like, just. Then, 2 days before Halloween. So again, just to preface, because this next part is written in, like, the first person, this is still from that article where the person was, or I can probably tell you her name again. Hang on. Abigail Tucker. So this is still Abigail Tucker's piece, because she interviewed the sexy archaeologist, right?
Okay, so, POV from Abigail.
Yes, gotcha. POV from Abigail. 2 days before Halloween, Belle and I head through forests of swamp maple and swamp oak to Exeter. For almost a century after Lena died, the town, still sparsely settled, remained remarkably unchanged. Electric lights weren't installed in the western part of Exeter until the 1940s, and the town had 2-pound keepers charged with the safekeeping of stray cattle and pigs until 1957. In the 1970s, when the I-95 was built, Exeter evolved into an affluent bedroom community of Providence, but visitors still occasionally turned to a corner to discover the past. a dirt road cluttered with wild turkeys or deer hopping over stone fences. Some elderly locals square dance in barns on the weekends, and the streets keep their old names: Sodom Trail, Noose Neck Hill, the white wooden Chestnut Hill Baptist Church in front of Lena Cemetery, built in 1838, has its original blown glass windows still. And early nor'easter wind is brewing as we pull into the church parking lot. The heavy rain will soon turn to snow, and there's a bullying wind. Our umbrellas bloom inside out like black flowers, and although it's a somber place, there's no immediate clue that an accused vampire was buried here, except perhaps for an unfortunately timed Red Cross blood drive sign in front of the farmer's grange next door. Which I love that little side bit, because it's like, it's kind of like, I love when people put stuff like this into their writing, because it's so relatable. Like when you go somewhere to do something and there's just something super ironic that happens to be going on at the same time, you're like, ooh, look how romantic and like mysterious my trip to this vampire grave is. And then there's like a sign to go donate blood, like right beside the church. It's like, okay, that's like, I mean,
it's gotta be a permanent tourist attraction. I think they need to just set up shop there.
It has to be.
I would donate blood if I went somewhere specifically to see like a vampire's grave and there was like a blood donation sign. I'd be like, iconic.
Literally, I'd be like, yeah, I'd be like, I gotta do for the plot, I think. Like, that's what we're here for literally. Now. Yeah, I didn't plan on donating blood today, but guess what I'm doing now?
They can't stop me. They will take my blood.
Basically. So, unlike Salem, Exeter doesn't promote its dark claim to fame, and remains in some respects an insular community. Old-timers don't really like the hooded figures who turn up at this time of year, or the cars idling with the lights off. They say that the legend should be left alone, perhaps with good reason. Last summer, a couple of teenagers were killed on a pilgrimage to Lena's grave when they lost control of their car on Purgatory Road. Which, like, not saying the devil was involved, but that feels...
Not saying the devil
was involved. But I feel like if you get into a car accident on Purgatory Road on the way to visit a vampire's grave, that's on purpose, right? That's not a coincidence.
I mean, it's kind of funny. Like, I hope that's how I go.
And like again, two teenagers dying will never be funny. But it's also, but when you look at it and you're like, oh, they were taken on a trip to a vampire's grave on Purgatory Road, you're like, well...
the jokes just write themselves.
Sometimes things can be funny about things that are not that funny. Sometimes happens.
Tragic comedy,
Yeah, exactly.
They're popular for a reason.
This is true. So, while most vampire graves stand apart in wooden spots outside the modern cemetery fences, where snow melts slower until there's a thick understory of ferns, but the Chestnut Hill Cemetery is still in use. And there is Lena. She lies beside the brother who ate her heart and the father who let it happen. Which, I feel like, I guess she died before them, or at least before the brother, so she couldn't have known that. But I feel like I would haunt somebody if that did happen to me after I died and be like, you gotta move my grave. I don't want to be buried by these people.
Yeah, like, who made that decision? Because they were not looking out for her.
No, that is not somebody who had her best interest at heart. But I guess they did think she was a vampire, so they were probably like, fuck that bitch. She killed her whole family because vampire.
For just existing.
Pretty much. So other markers are freckled with lichen, but not hers. The stone looks to have been recently cleaned, which maintenance is always good. Graveside maintenance, love it. But her tombstone has been stolen over the years and is now anchored into the earth with iron straps. So people have scratched their names onto the granite. They leave offerings, plastic vampire teeth, and cough drops. There was also once a note that said, "You go, girl," Belle says, and today there's a bunch of trampled daisies and dangling from the headstone's iron collar a butterfly charm on a chain. Which... I actually don't love any of those things. Like, I get wanting to travel somewhere, like to a grave that has a story behind it, but I feel like a lot of these things are very disrespectful.
I feel like It's interesting because I feel like the, dark tourism, quote unquote, has its place and people have mixed opinions on it, whatever. I feel like where the line is drawn is desecrating graves.
Yeah.
Maybe we shouldn't do that. Maybe we should all just collectively agree to not.
And that's the thing, like, I can appreciate, like you said, dark tourism for a lot of things. But when it gets to a point where you're, like, littering and carving your name into, like, a tombstone, like I said, the disrespect, like, you can go and visit something because you have an interest in it and you find it and you like the stories involved without acting the fool.
But I think that's with anything, like, you can go to a historic site without wrecking it wrecking it or stealing.
Yeah, the stealing's a big thing. Like, people wanting to take souvenirs from places. I'm like, I understand that you want something in your house to look at it and be like, memories. But that's also...
Maybe not someone's gravestone?
Yeah. I feel like it's one thing if you're, like, going to, like, Rome and there's, like, a pebble on the ground that you think is nice looking and you're like, a Roman pebble for my journey. Whatever. Who cares? But yeah, like, when you're taking, like, actual, like, pieces of something or parts of the place that you're in or carving your name into things, let's just, like... Maybe let's not.
Yeah. Like, it just kind of gives me the ick.
Yeah, like, nobody's going to Mercy Brown's grave and wanting to look at Tony and Joyce 2007 forever XOXO on her grave. Nobody cares. Why are you doing that?
Because they're divorced now. We know it.
You're like, it's been, like, almost 20 years. Like, we know.
We know they're divorced. Come on, Tony and Grace.
Yeah. No. It's not happening. So then how did 19th century Yankees, remembered as the most pious and practical of people, come to believe in vampires, especially when the last known vampire panics at the time hadn't occurred since 18th century Europe? Some modern scholars have linked the legend to vampiric symptoms of diseases like rabies and porphyria, which is a rare genetic disorder that can cause extreme sensitivity to sunlight and turn teeth reddish brown, which I did not know about. And Exeter residents at the time claimed that the exhumations were a tradition of the Indians. Which, here's another thing. Can we maybe stop blaming bad things that happen in rural communities on, like, First Nations people? I feel like, especially with my stories, that comes up a lot.
Yeah, it's not great. No. I would love it if they could just, not.
Yeah. Again, this goes back to respect. And I understand that you may not want to have certain negative things associated with your community, but maybe don't blame Indigenous people.
Others?
Yeah. I feel like there's a better way to manage that, the poor history, as you will.
Yeah, maybe just take responsibility for your shitty actions and then we can all move on.
That too. Especially if it's like your ancestors and stuff, because nobody cares what the people who were already here and did. You could be
dead.
Like, oh,
what are they
I don't know
do?
anything about it. Could have been my great-great-grandpappy who was involved, but I don't know anything.
Literally, you never met him. Why do you fucking care?
Literally. So, the legend originated in Slavic Europe, where the word vampire first appeared in the 10th century. Bell believes that the Slavic and Germanic immigrants brought the vampire superstitions with them in the 1700s, perhaps when Palatine Germans colonized Pennsylvania or Hessian mercenaries served in the Revolutionary War. My sense is that it came more than one time through more than one source, he says. The first known reference to American Vampire Scare is a scolding letter to the editor of the Connecticut Courant and Weekly Intelligencer, published in June of 1784. Councilman Moses Holmes from the town of Willington warned people to beware of a certain quack doctor, a foreigner, who had urged families to dig up and burn dead relatives to stop consumption. Which... I just want to know where this guy was from. Like, I get that he says foreigner, but this is also like 1784, what? Connecticut? Pennsylvania? Either way. I'm like, does that mean they're from, like, Texas? Like, what does he mean?
Who's to
Who
say?
knows? Literally, who's to say? We left that knowledge in 1784, I guess.
I think so.
Right? But he urged families to dig up and burn dead relatives to stop consumption, and then Holmes had witnessed several children disinterred at the doctor's request and wanted no more of it. And that the bodies of the dead may rest quiet in their graves without such interruption, I think the public ought to be aware of being led away by such imposture. But some modern scholars have argued that the vampire superstition made a certain degree of practical sense. In Vampires, Burials, and Deaths, folklorist Paul Barber dissects the logic behind vampire myths, which he believes originally arose from unschooled but astute observations of decay, which would include bloated dead bodies appear as if they have recently eaten, a staked corpse screams due to the escape of natural gases, etc. Which, like, yeah, I could actually see that.
Yeah.
And then
I feel like that makes logical sense.
Yeah, especially if you don't understand death or the knowledge isn't there and somebody's died and now you're like witnessing this happen. Like, yeah. Yeah.
You're like, holy shit, this is so weird.
Yeah, you're like, this is fucking crazy, man. I don't know. That body just screamed at me. Like, you wouldn't know.
Oh my god.
So the seemingly bizarre vampire beliefs, Barber argues, get that the essence of contagion, the insight that illness begets illness, and death. So vampire believers say that death comes to us from invisible agents. Barber says we say that death comes to us from invisible agents. The difference is that we can now get out a microscope and look at the agents, which, again, makes sense to me. Like what we know now versus back then. Right? Especially the whole deal about consumption very frequently being like a diagnosis for vampirism. If you don't know what germs are, I guess, yeah.
I mean, I feel like a lot of the times people are making the best out of what information they have, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
So when you don't know certain things or you don't have the information, you're going to make the best assumption based on the information you do have.
For sure. And this is also in a world, like I just said, where people think that natural gases escaping your body out of one of your orifices is the body screaming. So...
I mean, I still think that.
Yeah, right. Well, I haven't seen otherwise yet, so...
Prove it.
Right?
Science people.
Get the scientists in here. Make them prove it. While New England's farmers may have been guided by something like reason, the spiritual climate of the day was also hospitable to vampire rumors. Contrary to their puritanical reputation, rural New Englanders in the 1800s were a fairly heathen lot, which is, I'm pretty sure, what my parents call me and my friends. Welcome. We are the heathen lot. But I digress. Only about 10% belonged to a church, and Rhode Island, originally founded as a haven for religious dissenters, was particularly lax. Christian missionaries were at various points dispatched there for more godly communities, and the missionaries come back and lament that there's no Bible in the home and no church going whatsoever, says Linford Fisher, a Brown University colonial historian. You have people out there
bunch of fucking sinners.
Literally, like, those fucking people don't even know what a Bible is pretty much what was happening. And you have people out there essentially in cultural isolation. Mary Olive, Alina's sister, joined the church just 2 weeks before she died, and her obituary said, "In place of organized worship, superstitions reigned, magical springs with healing powers, dead bodies that bled into the presence of their murders. People buried shoes by fireplaces to catch the devil if he tried to come down the chimney, and they nailed horseshoes above doors to ward off evil and carved daisy wheels, a kind of colonial hex sign, into the door frames." Which, I find all those things very fascinating. I just want to know who started burying shoes by the fireplace. I want to know the first person who did that and then told their friends to do that.
And their reasoning why. You know, like, what brought them to that conclusion that that was the move.
I just like the idea that maybe they had, like, bats in their chimney at some point, and rather than look, they were like, "It's the devil!" And they just,
holy shit,
what do we do? And they just, like, buried their loafers there, and they were like, "Oh my god, they left. That's crazy."
It works.
The devil's allergic to shoes. I don't know. I just find all this stuff so fascinating. I could go on forever, but either way, we'll move past burying shoes. If
Hesitantly, but we will.
Yeah, right. So if superstition likely fanned the vampire panics, perhaps the most powerful forces at play were communal and social. By 1893, there were just 17 people per square mile in Exeter. A fifth of the farms were fully abandoned, the fields turning slowly back into forests, and in her monograph, The New England Vampire Belief, Image of the Decline, Gothic literature scholar Fay Ringle Hazel hints at a vampire metaphor behind the westward hemorrhage. The migration seemed to drain rural New England of its most enterprising young citizens and leaving the old and unfit behind. As Exeter teetered near collapse, maintaining social ties must have taken on new importance. An exhumation represented first and foremost a duty to one's own kin, dead or dying. The ritual would alleviate the guilt someone might feel for not doing everything that they could to save a family, to leave no stone unturned, Bell says. And even more significant, in small communities where disease could spread quickly, an exhumation was an outward display that you were doing everything you can to fix the problem. Residents were already beleaguered, town were likely terrified. They knew that if consumption wiped out the Brown family, it could take out the next family, and George Brown was being entreated by the community, and he had to make a gesture. So basically, superstition is kind of the driving factor behind why this even happened in the first place. It wasn't just a morbid curiosity, but almost like the dad's duty to his family and to his community to kind of like prove that they were safe, sort of, you know?
Yeah.
So that's kind of like one of the motivating factors behind how this started. And then the strongest testament to the power of the vampire myth is that George Brown did not, in fact, believe in it, according to the Providence Journal. So this whole thing, it was literally just like, I'll show you vampires don't exist. And then they did all this, and everybody was like, oh my god, it's a vampire! You know?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, this is according to the Providence Journal. And it was he who asked the doctor to perform an autopsy at the graveyard, for it was he who elected to be elsewhere during the ritual. He authorized his loved one's exhumation, the journal says, simply to satisfy the neighbors, who were, according to another newspaper account, worrying the life out of him. A description with its own vampiric overtones. So the journalists were just kind of having a field day with this. The neighbors were like, we need proof that she ain't no vampire. And he said, fine. And then the journalists were like,
dig her up.
Let's get her out of here. Like, just, you know, probably some things happened that definitely should not have happened. And then perhaps it was wise to let them have their way, though, since George Brown, apparently not prone to tuberculosis, had to then coexist with his neighbors well into the next century, because he then died in 1922. So after all this, his whole family gets wiped out by tuberculosis, and everybody thinks that he comes from a family of vampires. Doesn't even die until the 1900s.
A resilient man.
Very resilient. So, relatives of the Browns still live in
I bet
Exeter.
it was out of spite, you know?
That's what I think sometimes. When
I think the most spiteful people live the longest. That's my theory.
At least in my personal life and looking at my older relatives, that does seem to be the truth. I would say that is not just a theory. That people who have a little bit of extra bitterness to their regular lifestyle do seem to outlive lots and lots of people.
I don't know why, but it does seem to work out that way.
It does, doesn't it? So if somebody can mail in and let us know what the science behind that is, I would love to know on a personal note.
Yeah, write us a letter.
Yes.
We'd love to know.
Yes. Pigeon. Send it through pigeon.
Or postcard.
Because Canada Post is...
So you're going to have to send it through FedEx.
Is currently on strike. So you're going to have to UPS it or FedEx or something else.
You'll have to get creative.
Exactly. So relatives of the Browns still live in Exeter and are laid to rest on Chestnut Hill, and some planning ahead have erected their grave markers already. It can be disconcerting to drive past somebody's tombstone on the way to his or her home for a vampire-orientated interview, which... is a little dark.
I can imagine.
But lots of people do that. Like, when you go to graveyards nowadays, like, not that I spend, tons of time in graveyards or anything like that, but you will often see tombstones where it's, like, somebody's birthday and then it's just the dash and nothing after because they haven't died yet. It's very forward-thinking.
Very, like, a prepared king.
You see, I'm very type A, so when I see stuff like that, I'm like, I should do that. Because then I at least get an opinion. But I also don't want to be buried, so that's already a different thing.
You gotta lay out the plans for your burial by ship.
For my post-humorous experience, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So, on a Sunday Halloween morning when Bell had left for his vampire folklore conference at the University of London, I, Abigail, returned to the cemetery to meet several Brown residents at the Farmer's Grange. They bring, swaddled in old sheets, a family treasure, a quilt that Lena had sewed. We spread it out on a scarred wooden table. The cotton bedspread is pink, blue, and cream. And we look from a distance at large patches of plain brown fabric that are really fields of tiny daisies. It's the work of a farm girl without any wasteful applique. Lena clearly ran out of material in places and had to scrimp for more. Textile scholars at the University of Rhode Island have traced her snippets of florals, plaid and paisley, to the 1870s and 1880s when Lena was still a child, and they wonder if she used her sister's and mother's old dresses for her project. Perhaps her mother's death, too, explains Lena's quilting abilities, which would be considered considerable for a teenager. She might have had to learn household skills before other girls, and the quilt is in immaculate condition and has likely been saved for something. Lena's hope chest thinks her distant relative Dorothy O'Neill, one of the quilt's recent custodians and a knowledgeable quilter herself. I think the quilt is exquisite, especially in the light of what she went through in her life, O'Neill says. She ended up leaving behind something beautiful. She didn't know she'd have to leave it, but she did. And Lena hasn't left entirely. She is said to frequent a certain bridge, manifested in the smell of roses. She appears in children's books and paranormal television specials, and she murmurs in the cemetery, say those who leave tape recorders there to capture her voice. She is rumored to visit the terminally ill and to tell them that dying isn't so bad. The quilt pattern that Lena used, very rare in Rhode Island, is sometimes called a wandering foot, and it carries a superstition of its own. For anyone who slept under it, the legend said, would be lost to her family and doomed to wander.
So I will not be using that pattern for gifts.
No, unless you want to return to this mortal plane in the form of a ghost, which some might be interested in, but
I won't be presumptuous.
Yeah, I'm not going to pretend I know what other people want. If you want to be a ghost and you can quilt,
knit your own quilt.
Yeah, if you want to be a ghost and you know how to quilt, it's called the Wandering Foot, and have at her,
Make it yourself.
Yeah, but that is the end of my part 2 of the Lena Brown case, because it is so interesting that one of America's first vampires kind of like spiraled into this like crazy, somewhat paranormal, historical, I don't know, I just thought the whole thing was so fascinating.
I loved the hot professor personally.
Oh yeah, he's like a key character in this
he's the star.
Yeah, he's the star of the show besides Lena Brown. Like, we're here for Lena, but also this hot professor knows
we came for Lena, we stayed for the hot professor.
Exactly. But I also am never not gonna love hearing about like superstitious colonial America. Like, it's just so interesting.
It is. I feel like it's in a league of its own with
it
like
really is, because it's such a blending.
The shit that they did.
Yeah, and it's such a blending too of like, because you can so tell that it comes from people from all over the world immigrating to America during a time where there wasn't like a lot of like scientific knowledge or anything, and just like cultures and stuff blend together to leave all these like weird little spooky superstitions. It is so cool to me.
Pitchforks ready.
Literally. Get your pitchforks ready and bury your shoes and carve daisies into your door frames and put horseshoes up your butt and do all
That's what we learned.
Yeah, and do all these things is what I learned from this story.
Yeah, I mean, That's truly what I'll take away from this story.
That's all I learned. But yeah, if you like today's episode, make sure to leave us a review. I'll do our closing notes here, and then we can talk more about our Christmas episode, because I'm sure Jen has some introductory notes she wants to make on that. So, like I said, if you want to leave us a review, feel free to wherever you listen to our podcast. Also, we have our website, which is www.wheelofcrime.com. We have our Patreon, which is Wheel of Crime at Patreon. We have our email, which is wheelofcrime@gmail.com. And you can follow us on social media, which is the Wheel of Crime Podcast on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. And lastly, we do still have our listener story forum open. It is a 24/7, every day of the year thing now. If you ever listen to an episode of ours and you're like, oh my god, I have so many things that I would like to say, and Emily and Jen have just the most melodic and luscious voices, and they must share my words with the public. You can write in.
True.
And we do themed, well, not really themed, but we do for special parts of your listener story episodes where we just dedicate the episode to telling your stories. So if you'd like to write in, feel free. That is up for sure on our Instagram, I'm pretty sure, and Facebook also, I'm pretty sure. It's up there on our social media.
Yeah. And yes, as Emily mentioned, next week Christmas time starts. It's time. I'm not going to do the high-pitched Mariah Carey voice for my editing ears.
Open for.
Yes. So we are going to spin the wheel. Emily and I are doing something a little different this year, and we are going to pick out a word to spell with our stories. So we're going to spin the wheel to figure out what our wonderful holly jolly word is. So what are the word choices, Em? Do you want to read those off?
For sure. So we have Xmas, because we had to, if we did the full word Christmas, that would be crazy. We'd be doing Christmas till next summer. So we have
It's a 4-letter word, all of the choices.
Yeah. 4, and 3. So we have Xmas, we have joy, we have Noel, we have toy, ice, gift,
Elf.
Elf. We got a few choices. We were keeping it diverse, but whatever word we end up landing on is going to be the choice for the next few weeks. So hopefully it's a good one.
All right, spin away, Em.
Whoa. Jesus. Hang on.
Drum roll.
Wheel, I think, at some point. But drum roll, it is Noel.
Ooh, that's fun.
That is fun. I don't honestly think I've really heard Noel in a Christmas sense since I was going to church all the time. So this is going to be an interesting next few weeks here.
Yes, so we're each week leading up to in this Christmas season, we're going to be doing 1 letter per episode. So next week we'll start with N, and then thus forth the O-E-L for Noel. So look forward to that.
Yeah, and I think that's pretty much it as far as our Christmas episodes go, because we could always do what we did last year where we had our different Christmas themes, but we've done that for the last, I think, 2 or 3 years, and there's only so many stories you can do. So we're
Santa.
We're having word fun this year. We're all gonna have a good time.
All right, but yes, that's it. That's all, and we will see you next week for a holly jolly episode. Okay, bye.
Bye.